Hey everyone, how are ya? Happy almost end of the week. For some people on here, it may actually be the end of the week. It's only Thursday where I'm at, but for some people, it's Friday. So, welcome to the Periscope. Thank you so much for joining me. I am JenniferBlanchard. I am an author and a story coach. I work with serious emerging novelists who want to save time, cut years off their learning curve so that they can write better stories and get published faster. So today I am talking about love stories. So to kind of back up, I am doing for the month of October, I'm doing NaNoPlaNMo, so National Novel Planning Month. And the reason is because National Novel Writing Month is coming up in November. And during this month, you have 30 days to write a 50,000 word novel. The problem is, if you don't really know your story before you write it, you're going to end up with 50,000 words of not actually a novel and not actually a story either. So, but that's why I'm doing this NaNoPlaNMo stuff, because I really want you to know everything you can possibly know about your story before you write it next month. And so to kind of go into that, all week I've been talking about concept and premise, which is really the foundation of a really good story. And today I wanted to kind of dive deeper into concept for a certain type of story, and that's a love story. And the reason I do this is because that's what I write. It's what a lot of people I work with are writing. And also a lot of people want to write love stories or, want to have a love story involved in their story. And so I wanted to talk about this because if you make an error, hi from Toronto, thanks for joining me. So glad to see you on here. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about concept and how it plays into writing a love story, because the biggest problem with love stories is that a lot of times they're not conceptual enough, and that's why they either get rejected by publishers, or that's why if they're self-published they don't find much of a readership. Okay, so going back to concept. Concept is the landscape or the setting of your story. So it's where your story takes place. It's the stage that the story unfolds on. It can also be an arena, a proposition. It can be a notion, a situation, a condition of some kind, or it could be a character who is conceptual. Now, that's usually in the case of like superheroes and people who have like magical powers and stuff like that. Oh, thank you so much for all the hearts. Whoever has the pink and the blue hearts, thank you so much. Okay, so the problem with love stories is, am I reading from a book? I have notes that I've written down in my moleskin, and just because if I try to remember everything I want to tell you off the top of my head, I will never remember it all. So I just have some notes that I wrote down. But okay, so love stories. Most of the time when someone comes to me with a love story, this is what they tell me. I want to write a love story about two people meeting and falling in love. And that's pretty common. I mean, that's what you would think a love story is, right? The problem is, this is not enough for a love story. There has to be more to it than that. Because really, if you're doing just a story about two people who meet and fall in love, that's more like an episodic narrative, not a story. And an episodic narrative is just the day-to-day tellings of someone's life. It's not a story. A story has an actual goal of some kind. So a character has a goal that they're trying to get across, they're trying to make happen in the story. So that's what separates a story from an episodic narrative. Now, the problem with a love story is that, again, there are certain things because of the genre that it falls into, romance or love stories. There are certain expectations that readers have. Number one being they want to see a happy ending, of course. But they also expect that two characters are going to meet. They're going to either be interested in each other and then fall in love, or they're going to not like each other at first, and then eventually, by the end of the story, they're going to like each other. But here's the thing. Without concept, a love story will fall flat. And so you need concept to really amp up your love story and make sure that it's more than just two people meeting and falling in love. And really, this is also where premise comes in. So premise is the plot of your story. And so a lot of times, again, writers will think, oh, the plot of my story is two people meeting and falling in love. But the thing is, that's not technically a plot, because going back to the definition of what a story is a protagonist who wants something, an antagonist who wants to oppose what the protagonist wants, and a journey that ensues because of it. So now in a love story, a lot of times the antagonist sometimes it's one of the people in the relationship, but a lot of times it's somebody outside of it who wants to stop the two people from being together in some way. And that's not always the case, but that's the case a lot of times. So the reason you need both, hi, how are you? Right 34 life. Hi, how are you? Good. Glad to see that you're good. I'm glad to have you on here. What kind of stuff do you write? So, kind of thinking about this in terms of love stories. So, okay, let's kind of make an example. So, two people falling in love and meeting. How can you amp that up and make that more conceptual? So you do that by giving it a really strong landscape. So what can you do with the story of two people meeting and falling in love that's going to make it different than every other story out there about the exact same thing? Because again, a romance is, in some ways, they're all about similar things. And so concept is what really allows you to amp up this story and make it more interesting and more intriguing to a reader than just two people meeting and falling in love. I mean, maybe that's interesting enough to some people, but mostly that's going to make your story flat. So think about concept as an arena. Okay, so let's look at different settings or landscapes that this story could unfold on. Well, let's see. A love story happening on a sinking ship is going to be a lot stronger than just two people meeting and falling in love. A love story that takes place in a nunnery, a love story that takes place between two patients in a hospital who are dying, a love story that takes place on another planet. A lot of different options here for making the love story more interesting and more conceptual than just meeting and falling in love. And the other thing you need to know is that, generic ideas are not enough. So if, for example, let's say you wanted to write a story about two people who work together at the local grocery store and they want to, they have their own agendas going on, they meet each other and they fall in love. Cool. But the problem is that's not that interesting. Most people don't really care about people falling in love at a local grocery store. It's not that interesting. But if you make the arena or the setting of the story something that people would be interested in, then that will make the story more conceptual. So, let me talk about the story I'm working on, for example. So the story that I'm working on, I wanted to write about, yes, like in her shoes. That story was a little off. I wasn't a big fan of that one. But yeah, just like that. So I am writing a story about a girl who is obsessed with a musician and she thinks he's her soulmate. And so she wants to, find a way to date him or whatever. But that's really not enough for the story to be interesting. And so the landscape is that she gets invited to go on tour with him and therefore now has to live in his world. And she's not quite ready for that because she's not a famous person. She doesn't know anything about, being a celebrity, and she's never really lived in this world before. And so this is going to allow her to, fall in love with this person or not. I don't know yet. We'll see what happens. But the idea is just this landscape. So, being on tour with another musician, a famous musician, that's going to lend a lot of conflict and dramatic tension to the story just by that being the landscape. Now, there's not even really a plot yet. That's just the concept. And so that's really how you take a story that could potentially be really boring, two people meeting and falling in love. I mean, it's been done so many times. And that's how you can make it more interesting, is thinking about the different landscapes or settings that you can use to create this love story. One that I really, really like that happened, I think it came out a couple of years ago, but they made it into a movie recently called The Fault in Our Stars. So that one was just about two teenagers who meet and fall in love, right? I mean, that's basically the story. But what made it more interesting is that one of the lovers, at the beginning, we find out she's got terminal cancer, so she's dying. And so that's going to make the love story a lot more interesting because now you're like, man, this person is dying and she's falling in love with this guy. And so that's going to make you more interested in reading the story. If I just said, oh, it's a story about two teenagers who fall in love, not that interesting. And so, John Green really made it interesting by adding this, element to it, by bringing concept to the story. And the concept is, these two cancer patients, basically, who are falling in love with each other. And then, of course, the ending twist changes everything and makes it not at all what you expected. And so that again, is another cool thing about how you can make a story different. But it's just the concept. The concept brought it to life in a bigger way. Now, yeah, and I was literally just about to talk about that one. Oh my God, how funny is that? Okay, so If I Stay. So you're saying If I Stay is an interesting story. Absolutely. So If I Stay is a great love story. And it is amazing because it's told in a way that's done not quite linear. So most stories, are beginning to end. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. But in If I Stay, it's a love story that's being told, and the love story itself is not the story. The love story is just the subplot. It's really the what's happening in the story is the plot, and the plot itself is this girl who gets in a car accident with her family, and she's, right in between life and death, and she has to decide, do I stay and go back into my body and keep going in my life, or do I go to wherever and, move on to the next world? And she has to decide this, and that's what the story is. But unfolding all around that is this love story between her and this musician that she knows. And so, that made the story so much more interesting than just a teenager falling in love with another, a musician. She's a musician and he's a musician. Like, yeah, that could have been interesting, but adding that, extra piece to it and telling the story in the way that it's told, not in a linear fashion, makes it so much more interesting and so much more exciting for someone to watch or read than it does if you're just seeing it start to finish. Oh, let's look at these people's love story and how it unfolded. Boring. Not going to be interesting to people. And so concept really helps you bring a story that's generic, that could be, something that's been done a million times. And especially in the romance category, it's been done a million times. Changing it and making it better by having something conceptual at the heart of it. And so that's really what you want to be focusing on when you're writing a love story, is thinking about, what can I do in this story that's going to make it different than other love stories? What can I bring to it, a setting or the stage the story is going to unfold on, or some sort of, situation like, in the example of The Fault in Our Stars, the, situation is that, or the condition, two people who are dying and they're falling in love with each other. And so that brings a lot of stakes and dramatic tension just in itself. And then, of course, there's a plot as well, which the premise comes in. But, if you have a love story that you want to write, if you're thinking about, how you can make a love story more interesting, you want to look at concept, because concept is going to help you amp your story up and make it so much more interesting and so much more of a vicarious experience for a reader. So again, if I was writing a story about two people who fall in love on, on a boat or something, kind of boring. No one, maybe someone will be interested in that, maybe not. I mean, it depends if you care about boats or not. But writing a love story about two people who are on tour together and falling in love is a little more interesting, because it's like, oh, well, I've never been on tour. A reader will say, well, I've never been on tour. I wonder what it's like to go on tour. I wonder what it's like to have a musician as a crush. I wonder what it's like to, whatever. And so that in itself makes it more interesting for a reader and makes the person want to read it and make it be more vicarious, because they say, hey, I'm never going to experience this in my real life, so I want to see what this character experiences. And so that's what makes it interesting. And then, of course, it's a love story. So, happy ending, all that stuff. But you really want to just be thinking about how you can amp your love story up with concept and just make it stronger. Because if you don't, it's just going to end up being either an episodic narrative about two people's day-to-day life as they fall in love, which, again, some people might be interested in, but it's not the stuff that bestsellers are made of. Best-selling books are things that give you something different, a concept that comes in, a different type of premise, something like that. And in the case of a lot of stories, you think it's a love story because the love story is so big and such a big part of the actual story, but it's not. So, for example, Twilight is a great one. Because in Twilight, you think, oh, this is a love story about, two people who fall in love. But really, that's the concept. So the concept of it is a vampire and a human girl fall in love. That's the concept. Now, what's conceptual about it is the fact that it's a vampire and a human. So you're automatically going to see things that you wouldn't see. Yes, Vampire Diaries, a lot of shows and movies and things and books about the same type of a thing. But the idea is that's the concept. The concept is this, vampire who has a totally different reality and a totally different lifestyle and life than the human does. They both fall in love. So that makes it interesting, and it makes you want to watch or read and see, what's going to happen. But that's not really a plot. And so that's where premise comes in. And in this story, so in Twilight, the plot is actually you have to have an antagonist. So if you don't have an antagonist, it's not a plot. So that's the whole point with plot, is there's an antagonist involved. And so with Twilight, the antagonist in the first one was the group of vampires who were attacking people in Forks randomly. And, so they're uncovering this over the course of the story. So the first plot point is actually when the vampires show up at the boathouse and we officially see them, because before that moment, we hadn't seen them in the story. We just heard that there was something happening and we hadn't been identified yet. So then we see them and we know, okay, these are the bad guys. This is who the characters are dealing with in the story. And then, of course, once the midpoint comes, the police chief and all the people searching for the creature that they thought was killing people, they discover it's human. And that changes the story in a big way. And then, of course, the vampires go after Bella, the protagonist. So that's, the plot of that story. But the whole point is that two people falling in love, and even if it's two people, a vampire and a human girl falling in love, is still not enough for a story. Because there still has to be some sort of conflict that's going to come in and that's going to stop them from being together, or that's going to cause some sort of a problem for them. And so that's where premise comes in. So I hope this was helpful. I could talk forever about this topic, and so I won't do that because otherwise we'll be on Periscope for the rest of our lives. But I love love stories. I think they're so amazing, and you can do them so great. It's just you want to make sure that what you're doing isn't just generic and isn't just going to be something that someone says, oh, read that before, or whatever. You want something that's going to make it different. And that's where concept really comes in strong, with helping you to bring something new to the table that hasn't been done before, or that has been done before, but you're doing it in a different way. So, in Titanic, that's another one. So that one seems like it's a love story, and it is in a lot of ways, but the love story was really subplot. The actual plot is this Titanic sinking. That's the story. And the love story is unfolding as this happens. But the plot itself is actually the sinking of the ship. And the concept is these characters that are falling in love in the, situation that they're in. The fact that they both have different classes that they have, that they're not technically allowed to be together, or that they shouldn't be because of their classes, and the fact that they, wouldn't normally be allowed to be together. And so that's really what made that story different. So if you're doing a love story, just be thinking about what kind of landscape or setting can you use, or, some sort of situation you can put these characters in so that you bring something different to the table, or something unique that's going to make the story a lot more interesting. So that is what I got for you today, and I hope it was helpful. I will be back tomorrow with another Periscope all about concept and premise, so I'm going to be talking about examples of these to kind of illustrate it a little more. And then next week, I'm going to be starting into character, so giving you all the stuff you need to know about your characters before you write them. And again, all of this is leading up to National Novel Writing Month, and so I'm going to be making sure you have all the information and the tips that you need to make sure that you have a badass story that you can write starting November 1st. And so if you are interested in seeing the replays of any of this stuff, if you haven't caught all the Periscopes I've been doing this week, you can go to this website right here, catch.me/inkybites, and that's my Twitter handle. And you can see all the replays for all of the planning that I've been doing and setting everything up. So that way you don't miss any of the information. And I will catch you tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye.